I didn't have to suffer too much of the cold.
Recording started.
So it was a good weekend.
That's
Anyhow, good morning. My name is Don. My last name is Gator, G-A-I-T-O-R. My email address is don.gator, G-A-I-T-O-R, at its.ny.gov. My desk phone is 518-549-0419. I work on the 36th floor of the Corning Tower, and my hours of work are 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., Monday through Friday. So we're going to go through a little bit of ServiceNow this morning and change management. And if you have any questions or you'd like to talk offline, please send me an email or leave me a message. I have voicemail, and I'll try to get back to you usually within 24 hours. Unless I'm on the road doing training, I can get back to you pretty quickly. So I'm just going to move this recorder down here so we can get it out of the way. But ServiceNow is the ITSM way of implementing ITIL throughout New York State. I believe the last count was some 47 different state agencies will be using ServiceNow for different functions. What we'd like to talk about today, what I'm going to go through today, is change management. And we'll start by showing you a few things about ServiceNow, how to navigate, how to use the menus and get around through ServiceNow. And then we'll get into the submitting a request for change, and it creates tasks and how to open new tasks, how to close tasks, and how to follow the change, and then finally how to close the change request so it will keep track. Anyhow, why are we doing change management? Well, I've got a few years with New York State, and back when I started as a COBOL maintenance programmer, we had one person in the shop that we could go to and say, hey, if I make this change to this, what will it affect, or is there a program I need to update, or how do I handle this change? And usually that one person or two people, at least a couple people, would know if you make this change in this database row, it's going to affect these following applications. Well, fast forward several years, at least a few decades, and now we're in a situation or an environment where a lot of the things we do, the changes we make, we have no idea what they might affect, or what databases might be affected, what routing, so on and so forth. What I'm trying to say is our environment is a great deal more complex than it used to be, with on order of probably 3 or 4 times more information and technology around us than there used to be. So change management is the way that we can keep change under control. We can keep track of items that we change, and then once we do that, Tim, could you mute your phone for me, please? I'm getting a lot of background noise from your phone.
You got it, no problem.
Thank you, sir. So what we have at the base of, or at the interior, the heart of ServiceNow and ITSM is a configuration management database, or CMDB. And in that CMDB, there are hundreds of thousands of CIs, and the CI stands for configuration item. And a configuration item can be anything from a server, to a switch, to a router, to a rack, to an application, to a database. It's basically infrastructure library, which is the last 2 letters of the acronym ITIL. We're keeping track of all of the pieces and parts of our environment. Now, some of you will have a pretty well-established and mature configuration management database, and then others are in the process of updating their configuration management database and the configuration items inside that configuration management database. What change management does in ServiceNow is it helps us keep track of those items that we're affecting. So, for instance, if we're changing an application, we would like to know who we need to notify, what other applications would be affected by it, or let's use an example of a database. I'm making a change to a database, a data definition language change, or data manipulation language change. What programs would be affected by that? Configuration management database and the configuration items contained within will help us keep track of that, and it'll the intent is to avoid confusion, downtime, changing things that break other things that no one knows about, the 2 o'clock in the morning phone calls for, hey, this doesn't work anymore, why is it? A lot of times lately we find that after some troubleshooting and some expensive troubleshooting, we find that the configuration item or the things in the configuration management database were changed by someone and they didn't fully vet the change, so it created problems. So in a nutshell, what we're trying to do is bring some sanity to a very involved, intricate, and complex IT world. The product we're using is ServiceNow, and you'll hear the term ITSM, Information Technology Services Management. That's the name for the process or the processes that we use, and ServiceNow is the software that it runs on. Looking at my screen, you'll see that I'm in the QA environment. We're going to use the QA environment today. It's a picture of the production environment, but while we're changing things and moving around inside here, we're not going to affect production. So the URL is up here at the top of the screen. If you want to go see what ServiceNow is about, if you're not using it and you want to see what it's like, there's the URL for it, and I'm hoping you'll take the opportunity to spend a few minutes to get familiar with it. Part of our training today is giving you some tips and tricks on how to maneuver and manipulate ServiceNow so it's a little easier to work with. So having said that, we're going to go to the gear right here to the right of the logout button. Call that a toolbar, call it a toolkit. And to change your home screen, right now I'm on Change Overview. But if you'd like to see a different dashboard, think of a dashboard as the dashboard in your car. It's got a speedometer, it's got a fuel gauge, it's got an odometer. It's information about your car at a glance. And ServiceNow dashboards work the same way. It's information about the environment at a glance. And as you can see, there are several different dashboards available to us. Change management, change overview, cluster incident overview, and so on. There's quite an extensive list. So to change my dashboard, I'm just going to go to that gear. I'm going to click on Home, and I'm going to go to Change Management so we can see what a different screen looks like. But this will bring up a different dashboard. And in that dashboard, there are things like gauges, these reports, and report lists. Pending approvals, change awaiting approval. There's a lot of information out here on the dashboard that you can get kind of at a glance, a bird's eye view of what's going on with change management. And when you sign on and choose a dashboard such as this, it will be information that's pertinent to you and your agency, your cluster, and so on. Now, one of the nice things, when you look at these graphs or different reports, say I want to find out there were 10 significant changes submitted. I want to see what they are. I can go right to that yellow section of this pie chart, click on it, and it brings up a list view of all of those changes. So I can drill right down into the change itself by clicking on the change number. See this change number here? I can just click on that, and that will bring me to the individual change itself so I can see who's requesting it, who's going to be working on it. There are notes about it, what's been going on with it. So this sort of information is helpful. Now I want to go back to my dashboard, so I'm going to click on this back button. And I'm back at the changes themselves. If I want to go back all the way to the home page, I can just click on Home, and that will bring up the last dashboard I looked at, or the last dashboard I had set up, was change management. So that's how you would get a little different view, depending on what it is you're trying to do in ServiceNow. That'll give you an idea how to go ahead and change your dashboard. Now that we've changed the dashboard, get an idea how to get an overall view of what's going on inside change management. I like to work in a couple different environments, and there are folks that have 2 monitors or they split the screen. And I work in QA, and I also work in the production environment. So in order to tell myself pretty easily what the difference is, I'll show you a little trick on what I use, but this is a system color. This is a standard interface, and at the top here, it'll tell me what environment I'm in. So if I take the time, if I'm smart enough, I take the time and read that, I'll know what environment I'm in. But I can also change the theme. So let's say to tangerine. Now I know whenever I look at the page, it's this tangerine color. I know I'm in the QA environment, as opposed to the production environment, which would be another color if I chose. So how do I move around in ServiceNow to make it easy? On the left-hand side here is a menu, and you can see that it's pretty extensive, everything that's available to me in ServiceNow. There's different processes and reports and many different ways of looking at ServiceNow. So for today's class, we're going to be talking about change. This is how I would get to it. I just went to the filter text, and I typed in change, and that brings up that heading. You can see there's a lot more, but this is the change environment that I want to look at, and I'm going to create a new one. But before I do that, sometimes you get to one section of ServiceNow and you want to go to another, and you kind of get limited to what your menu is. These three bars to the right of the filter text box will allow me to show different menus. So I'll select all, and then I have the ability to see everything else. Now, for instance, if I wanted to administer users, then I would just type in users. But as you can see, that's a quick way to maneuver through the menu without having to scroll up and down. So we're going to go to create a new request for change this morning. And the first screen we see is the change request models, or the types of change requests that we're going to submit. There are 4 that we're going to use in the health cluster, and the last 2, IBM mainframe, don't apply to us, so we're not going to talk about those today, but we'll start with an emergency change. What's an emergency change request? Why do we submit that? An emergency change is if you're in a production environment and you have a problem and you're trying to fix it, a lot of times you don't have time to go back and submit a request for change and get the approvals. You really just want to get that system back up and running and get production back on its feet so you stop getting phone calls that things aren't working. So we would submit an emergency change request after the fact, after we've gone and made the changes and we've made the fix and production is back up and running. We go back and submit an emergency change. The reason we go back and submit an emergency change is because we want to keep the configuration management database with its associated configuration items current. That's important for servers, applications, databases. You can see where having a current configuration is imperative to keeping things correct so you can develop those associations and see what changes affect what. So that's if you've already made a change and you've got production back up on its feet, you go in and submit an emergency change, and we'll go through how quickly and easily we can do that. But the emergency change, the idea is to let management know that the change has been made, and then most importantly, update the configuration items within the configuration management database. An immediate change is somewhat similar, but it would be a scenario, a use case for this would be, I have a gauge that tells me, or an event monitor that tells me that my server is running at 95% utilization on the CPU, or my disk is filling up, I'm at 90%, and if I don't do something quickly, then production will suffer as a result of it. So what we want to do is we want to submit an immediate change. It follows the same process, but it is something letting management know and letting everyone else know, we need to make this, we need to review this request for change, and we need to make this change quickly to keep production up and running. Next, we have an average change, and the average change is what most of us should be using, and hopefully all of us will be using. This is following the SDLC, the Software Development Lifecycle process, whereby we identify the need for a change, we develop the change, we test the change, then we request the change, we implement the change, and then finally test it again to make sure that it's working as we think, and then we close the change. When we close the change, it does keep the configuration items within the configuration management database up to date. Last that we're going to talk about today is undocumented. There are times where in a production environment, someone will make a change and think that it's not going to affect anything, or it doesn't really matter that we document it. Whatever the case may be, this is for a change that's already been made, and it may be found a month later, a week later, a day later, or an hour later that, hey, this item isn't the same as the configuration management database says it is. So we'll go back and document that change so we can keep the configuration item, again, keep the configuration item current and the configuration management database up to date. So those are the 4 types that we'll be using in the production environment within the health cluster. And we're going to go to average today. That's what we'll talk about. So I'm going to select average. And Tim, I'm sorry, this is interactive by all means. If you have any questions, feel free to just click in or raise your hand or however you want to do it. But
all right, you got it.
Thank you, sir. So I've clicked on an average change. First I went to change, then I chose create new, and then I chose an average change. Now I'm at a change request. And the first field I see, you'll notice there's an asterisk or a star next to that field. That star means that it's required information. The system will not let you go further, save or submit the request for change until values are added to those fields. So the short description is an 80-character field. It allows you to put 80 characters in there to be succinct and explain what the change is. And the reason it's 80 characters is ServiceNow, when it's going through the normal change request process, will send an email when the state of a change changes. It will go from draft to work in progress, approved, several different states, and every time that state changes, it will send an email. When we get down a little bit here, you'll see who it sends emails to, but for now, we're just going to put in a short description. I'm going to put my initials in here so I can find it easy. Again, 80 characters. It is the subject line of every email that the system generates from that point forward. Next field down is change number. This is assigned by the system. I don't know if you can see it on your screen, but it's slightly different color. I can't change this. This is a system assigned value. It's just random, well, not random, it's sequentially assigned numbers that ServiceNow uses to keep track of individual changes. So we'll skip down to the next field. This is requested by me. I'm signed on. It automatically defaults to me. There are cases where you could be submitting a change on someone's request or behalf of someone. You could put their name in there, and it will always show the user that's logged on is the opened by. The person that requested the change could be different. And if you don't know the person's name, let's pick on somebody. We're just going to click on that magnifying glass. And since Rock Huey's been such a great sport for training here, I'm going to see if we can find him. And look, there he is. So I can click on his name. Now it's requested by. Well, what if there's more than one person named Rock Huey? I can find out by hovering over this little icon here. Looks like a calendar with an eye on it. This will tell me who I selected to put in that box. And as you can see, it's got all kinds of pertinent information, where they work, what their phone number is, what their location is. So you would use that icon just to make sure that you've got the right person in the requested by. Or, as always, you can just leave your name. A lot of times, maybe most times, you'll just leave your own name in there. Location field is next. It's not a required field, but there are times where changes are being made for different locations. Department of Health has many throughout New York State. And if you're changing, let's use the example of a configuration on a datacom switch. It might not be at your office. It might be at 44 Holland. It might be a number of different places. And how can I find that? Well, ServiceNow has a couple of different ways to look for things. I can type in 44 Holland, and it locates the address or the location for me. Or I can also use the same magnifying glass search feature, and it brings up a list of many different locations. So for today, we're just going to use 44 Holland Ave. I'm going to select that. And when I do, you'll see it goes down to HSEN Site ID, Human Services Enterprise Network ID. Some locations are actually tied to a Human Services Enterprise location, data center, if you will. And this is not something you'll put in there. This is something that gets filled out automatically when you choose an address that's associated with an HSEN data center. Next down, watch list. Watch list is important for folks that we want to let know what's going on with the change. You may have a customer, you may have a coworker, a person in another unit that you want to inform of the change, and you want to inform them when the state of the change alters or changes. So let's say, and I should say change request, when the state of the change request changes. Let's say we're putting it in draft, and then we're going to put it in submitted for approval, and then it gets approved, it goes to work in progress, and then from work in progress it goes to implement and so on. Again, the number of states are up here, but you'll see that when we add someone to the watch list, by clicking on that person icon, it looks like this, add me, I add myself, but I can also go down and enter an email address. Again, we'll pick on my friend Rock. And there's his user ID. Now, again, you see there are two of them, but we're just going to select one. Now, every time that the state of the request for change changes, that system, the system ServiceNow will send out an email. And you can add a number of people there, or you don't have to add anyone. And then I'm just going to close that by clicking on the lock. So you see two of us are on the watch list. Work notes list works very similar. As we get down in the notes section of the request for change, I'll show you the difference. But work notes, again, is there a coworker that needs to know when I'm making a change? Certainly in today's environment, changes need to happen sometimes sequentially. I'm going to change this and then you can change that, or this needs to happen before you can do that. So you might want to use that work notes list to let your coworkers know, hey, this request for change has gone from work in progress to implement or to test verify, and now it's closed. If they get the email, they'll know automatically from the system that it's time to go ahead and do their part. Next field down is parent. Why is this request for change being submitted is the best way to explain this field. What incident or event or change has spawned the need to create another request for change? The system keeps track of everything by a number, as you can see. That's this change request. So if this is spawned by an incident or a ticket, you probably will know the incident number or the ticket number. But again, you can use the type ahead feature, or you can use the magnifying glass feature. Let's just say that this one we're just going to choose something that sounds legit. Reimaging a workstation, that sounds good. We're going to put in this change because this incident is currently open, and in order to close that incident, we're going to submit this change, and that should correct the problem. Change managers group. In this case, it's going to be CM space health cluster. The change manager is Art Payur for the health cluster. Change manager plays an important role in terms of helping you with a change request that you may not know what information to put in there, or as we get down into the category and schedule, you'll see the change manager is responsible for approving certain changes, reviewing them, or in this case, in some cases, moving them up to management for approval. But in any case, if you're in the health cluster, you're going to choose the change manager from the health cluster. Now we're going to go back up here. We're in draft state. We're still creating the request for change. We haven't requested approval yet. Do we need customer approval? In some cases, our customer has to say it's okay to make this change. For instance, if it's a production system and the customer, even though they have maintenance windows and you know, certain periods that you do perform work, there are sometimes in certain applications where a customer needs to give their approval saying it's okay to make this change at this time. If that were the case, we would just select required, and then of course, no action needed is not required. This is a system assigned date and time. This is when we opened the change request. This is the person that opened it. Assignment group, again, a required field here. Who needs to be the person making the change, or who is this change request going to go to so they can actually do it? We can choose, again, either the magnifying glass and do a search, or we can use the type ahead feature. I'm just going to go ahead and use this one. It's a group that I know of. And sometimes when you're requesting a change, sometimes someone's going to be posting that change, or they're going to be shepherding that change for you. If it is an individual, you would put their name in the assigned to. Most cases in today's environment, we would just leave that blank, because this assignment, this request for change, will actually go to a group, and when it goes to that group, the manager of that group will get to choose, or will choose, who will be implementing, testing, verifying, however, whatever actions need to be taken. The manager will be the person deciding that. But there are other cases where it's an individual within that group that you've worked with. They know all about it. So you can just click on that group and put a name in there. Because it's the L2 Enterprise Operations Information Technology Services Management Group, I know that these folks are in that group, so I'm just going to select one of them because this person's aware of the change, knows what they need to do, knows what the implications there are, and I'm just going to put my name in there for now. Notification groups, remember, and we're going to touch on this a couple of times, but there's a watch list, a work notes list, and now a notification group. These are just ways that the system will automatically generate emails to individuals or specific groups, so you can keep them up to date as to what's going on with the request for change. And again, I click on the padlock icon, and I can select a group, or I can just go ahead and type ahead. This will send an email to the entire group when the state of the request for change goes from one to another or changes. And then if it's in your way, of course, you can just click on the padlock again and close it back up. Next field is most important in that this is where you get to be verbose. You can describe the change. This is a free-form text field. You can add as many notes as you'd like. I don't know the limitation off the top of my head, but I know it takes many, many lines of information if you choose. And the reason that this is a good field to fill out is if I'm reviewing the change and you haven't discussed it with me, or I'm not familiar with what it is you're attempting to do, I'm going to have some questions about whether or not I need to approve it. So I'm going to go ahead and type a longer description in here, just so the person reviewing the change, be it the change manager or the change advisory board, anyone that's going to be reviewing the change after it's submitted, I'm going to put that information in there so they don't have to call me or email me or stop by my desk to ask me what I'm up to. So let me just type a little information in there. Now I've completed the very top section of the request for change, and now we're going to get into some facts about the request for change that we'll start with the tab on the left here. Category, what's the classification of my change? In ITIL and subsequently ServiceNow and ITSM, we classify changes one of four different. There's a standard change, which is a change that I make all the time. I'm very familiar with it. It's something I do quite regularly, and it goes fine every single time. Think of something like a Microsoft security patch to a server would be something that would be like a standard change. When you submit a standard change, the only person that needs to approve the standard change is the change requester. And remember before we talked about when we were doing the different types of change, whether it be emergency or average or immediate or undocumented change, this will play a role in that. Undocumented change, you don't really need approvals. You've already made the change, or the change is already made. And kind of the same with an emergency, but in some cases you may want people to know that you've made the emergency change, so you would bump it up to maybe next one up would be a minor change. When you submit a change classified as minor, it gets reviewed by the person submitting the change, and then it goes to the change manager for their review and approval. Again, depending on your area, the change manager will review it. If they don't have any questions, they'll approve it. If they do have questions, they'll contact you and work out those details. But a minor change would be, a use case of a minor change would be, I'm making an application change. I haven't changed this a lot of times. I've done my testing, I've done my documentation, but I'd just like another set of eyes to take a look at it to see that everything looks okay. So it's a minor change. Next level up from that would be significant. Now, significant takes another path for approvals. It's the submitter approves it, the change manager reviews it and approves it, and then it goes to the change advisory board. Change advisory board is a group of people that are convened to review a change that might be, it might affect more than one agency, it might affect a couple of applications, something a little bit more involved. You can even use the use case of saying, I wasn't able to test this application because I don't have a test bed or a mirror environment, but I've done all of the testing I can do and I believe it's going to be fine. That's something that you want to keep people informed of, and a change advisory board is made up of people that are higher level management for different business areas. For instance, database, datacom, application programming, that sort of thing. There's usually one person from each of those groups represented on the change advisory board, and they will also review it and approve it. Hopefully will approve it. And then last is major. That's reserved for things like I'm moving a data center, I'm changing a rack, I'm taking all the blade servers out of a rack and moving them to a different rack. And that would be something that would be across cluster implications. If it's going to be more than one cluster, it may rise to the level of major. If it's going to be a long-term outage of services, production services, outside of a maintenance window, those sort of things would be a major change. And though the chain of approvals for that goes from the submitter to the change manager to the change advisory board, and then finally to the change advisory board executive committee. If it's submitted from one cluster, the CIO of that cluster would be involved in the CAB EC, and directors, that sort of folks. And again, the reason that you do a different classification is for notifications, keep people in the loop, that sort of thing. For today's class, we want to follow the lifespan of a change request through. So I'm just going to do standard because I can approve that on my own and I don't have to wait for anyone else's approval. Category self-explanatory. Is it application software? Is it hardware? Is it a business service, network, telecom? And then the catch-all would be others. So we're just going to use system software today and move to the next field, which is risk. How well has this change been tested? How sure am I that it's going to work perfectly first time, every time? That sort of risk assessment is something that we've learned for years and years in IT, but the system does have a request for different approvals based on the risk level. So if I say there's no risk involved, then it's only going to be me approving it. But if I go up to low risk, again, use your judgment here, and I can talk about risk for, there's classes that are given just on risk assessment, but when I go to a low risk, the business unit approval level goes from me up to one manager, and that could be the manager that signs your time card, is the best way I like to point it out. That's just one manager above you. I go to a medium risk or moderate, then it becomes me and my boss and my boss's boss. Important point to make here, these approvals go in a vertical direction. They're not horizontal. These are the submitter, the submitter's supervisor, and the submitter's supervisor's supervisor. And then finally, if we go to a high risk, then it's 3 manager approvals. And if you think of it, it's you, then your supervisor's supervisor, and then the last is your supervisor's supervisor's supervisor. I always have to tap my fingers so I can remember how many I've gone to, but that's 3 verticals, and for a lot of us, you'll see that when you get 3 verticals, you're almost at a CIO level. So high risks should be involved, and they should be, should involve several people, and they should keep a lot of folks informed of the change by putting them on the watch list, the work notes list, the notification groups. However we choose to notify them, we want them to be aware of the change. Additionally, we want them to approve the change. So again, using your judgment, you would put your risk level in there. In this case, I'm going to say none, so we can follow the life cycle. But so I'm the only person that needs to approve it. These fields are filled out by the system. It's an average change, average urgency, and it's a comprehensive change that affects more than one specific area. On the right-hand side here, none of these fields have asterisks next to them or stars next to them. None of them are required when we do a standard change. However, when we go to significant or a major change, these fields do need to be completed. They're pretty self-explanatory. Again, it's all a matter of gauging how much risk or what the success probability is of submitting this change. No outage is the lowest risk, and then all the way up to, I honestly don't know what the outage score will be. That one is one we want to try to avoid at any cost, but these fields, again, don't need to be completed if it's a standard or a minor change, but when you get to a significant or a major classification of change, these need to be completed. They become mandatory. And just to show you what they are, you can kind of get an idea from looking at them what ones are the highest and what ones are the lowest. Experience, I have significant experience. I have no experience. Testing, same idea. I don't think there's any testing required, all the way up to I wasn't able to test because I don't have a mirror environment to test this on. And, that happens. We understand that. But, again, significant or major, you'll be required to fill out these scores. And when you do, they will change the urgency and the type of change as well, just to reflect what the change is about. Reason for change, slightly different than description. I'm making this change because there was an incident that I had to submit a ticket for, and the ticket requires me to complete this change to close the ticket, or we're moving to a new version of Oracle, or we're moving to a new datacom line. Anything along those lines is what you would put in here. Again, a free-form text field, it's probably a good idea to be explain as well as you can, because sometimes the people reviewing these changes will have not had any vision of it before. So it's a good idea to put in as much information as you can. And by the way, we're going to touch on this in a couple other spots, but let's say, for instance, you had to write up documentation for submitting this change, and your justification was a couple of pages long. It could happen where we'd have let's say, a Word document or a spreadsheet, something along those lines. I don't want to retype it here, so I can just type in "see attachment" and then go here and click on this field, and it will allow me to choose any file that I have to attach. It works the same as a lot of the Windows features, so you can go into that and attach your justification for making a change or anything along those lines. If you have a spreadsheet, all of those things can be added to this, and that way you don't have to retype it every time. So now we've completed the top section that tells us about the change, who's making it, where it's being made, what groups are going to be working on it, who needs to be notified, and then we're down to the category, and the category is what type of change is it? Is it something that has no risk or high risk? So that's going to be necessary to fill that out. And next, when are we going to make the change? When is it requested by? Simple calendar function here. Today's the 17th, so we're just going to use today. And by the way, they do require seconds in here. I guess in a global organization, it might be important to have that. Most times, I'm just going to tab over and I'm going to zero it out. But today at 11 o'clock, we want to make this change. So I'm going to click on that and save that, and that puts the requested by date in that field. And then the planned start date. Well, I figure it's going to take me probably an hour to make the change, so I'm going to put 10 o'clock in there. Is when I'm going to start it. And then, again, we can just tab over any of these fields. I'm just going to click on delete here to get rid of that one as soon as I find the delete key. Forgive me, I'm not familiar with this keyboard. And then tab 00, wiping out the seconds. So I'd like this change to be done by 11 o'clock. It's going to take me about an hour, so I'm going to start it at 10 o'clock. And then you'll see the planned end date actually comes up as 10 o'clock, but I believe it's going to finish at 11. So I'm just going to write over the top of that field, and that's when I plan to end it. Now, for an average change with low risk or standard change with average standard change with low risk, I've filled out all the fields I need to fill out. At this point, I can click on Final Submit, and it will send it down the chain. It will actually go through the required approvals based on setting the system up on your organizational chart. It will go from you. If it doesn't need any further approvals, then it goes to work in progress, and it generates two tasks. First task is to implement the change. Second task is to test and verify that the change worked as expected. And then when I close those two tasks, it closes the change and it updates the configuration management database. However, as you've heard, and what's important to keep in mind, the approvals change, and the workflow for this change goes different paths depending on the number of approvals that need to be given before you can submit it. But on a standard change where there's no risk and I'm the only person approving it, once I click on Final Submit, it follows the workflow. The state changes to work in progress, and the folks that are on the watch list, work notes list, notification groups, get an email saying this change has been submitted and approved. That scenario changes depending on the level of category of the change or classification, excuse me, of the change. That workflow will change, but in this case, we just went ahead and submitted a standard, no risk request for change that was an average change. When I've done that, it saves the change, changes the state, it goes to approved state because I was the only person that needed to approve it, And then it's done a couple of other things down below here. I'm going to scroll down, and I see that it's changed or created, excuse me, 2 change tasks. And you'll see those tasks are implement the change, and it's an open state, and then test and verify the change. That's waiting for me to implement the change and close it. Until I close this task, this implement change, this will remain pending. It's waiting for this task to complete. The sequential aspect is important to remember here because some changes require more than just to implement and test verify. Some changes, there are several tasks associated with it to make the change happen. So how do I do that? How do I keep track of that? Well, I can create my own tasks here. And when I click on that, it brings up, again, a short description. It assigns a task number to it. It talks about the configuration item that we're changing. I just want to click on that real quick so you can see, even in our QA environment, we have, looks like 121,498 configuration items. And as you can see, they're all different types and shapes and sizes and kinds. I'm just going to go to the last part of the list. Now we're getting into servers, ports, that sort of information. So it's important to keep that in mind, that the configuration management database has, even in our QA environment, several 100,000 configuration items that we want to keep current. So if you know it, you should be able to find it in the configuration management database. If not, we'll get you some help to see if we can find it. A lot of times in this environment, you know specifically what you're working on. So go ahead and put that in there. What's the priority of this task? Is this a critical task? Does this one need to take place first? Can it take place second, third, fourth? Put that in there if you know it. Work notes list. Work notes list associated with the task. Is there a different group or a different group of people who only want to know about the task? They don't particularly care about the change, but they want to know what the task, the state of the task is. In this particular case, it's open. This is the group that's going to be doing that task it's assigned to, and then the individual within that group, and then it is associated with this change that we're working on. This has a schedule as well. When you expect to start, when it's due by, and then when you start, when it actually goes to start, the state changes to work in progress. This date, work start, and time changes. And then when it goes to a closed, complete state, this work end date and time gets completed. The system will do that. But we're not going to add a task today because I just want to give you an overview of how tasks are added. We're going to go back to the change we've been working on, and we're going to go back to the change tasks and say, okay, I've implemented the change. 2 ways to close this. You can click on the task number, system assigned task number, and go to this and say, it's now closed complete. And when I do that, and save it, or update it, I'm still a work in progress. My tasks are still open, but you see this has gone to close complete, and what that does is it triggers this task to open. So let's go back to this task just so I can show you what happens. I didn't put a start date in there because I just went to close complete. I didn't put it in work in progress state. I just went ahead and closed it. This is when it was closed. Now we'll go back to the change again, the request for change. Go down to tasks. You'll see that the test verify change has opened. That task has now gone to a different state, so we can do our test verification. We can go to click on the task and change the state, or we can just right-click here and say close task. I'm not going to do that just this second, but I will go back to that because if I close that, then the change itself will go to closed complete. The reason I'm not going back to that is I want to talk a little bit more about these tabs here. That's just one tab, the tasks that are associated or spawned by a request for change when it gets approved. What configuration items am I working on? I can add configuration items. Sometimes there's more than one. A lot of times there's more than several. What services or configuration items are impacted by this change? When you identify an affected CI, it will go and put in any services that are associated with that configuration item to tell you that they're affected by it and make the necessary notifications. Group approvals, are there groups that need to approve it? Are there individuals that need to approve it? Those are all listed here, so you can kind of check on the state of your request for change. Say you submit a request for change and you haven't seen anything about it in a day or two or even a week, I suppose, and you want to say, well, who hasn't approved it? Why haven't they approved it? You can follow that back and click on here, and it'll tell you when the request for approval was submitted and who the approver is and if they've made any comments to it. The others, problems, this is how we associate changes to problems. Problems are opened when we have more than one incident that's the same. Say, for instance, we have several users who can't sign on to an application. What we find is, well, they need to clear their cache before they can open the browser to that application again. It may open fine the first time, but the second time, they actually have to clear their cache. That's a workaround that we've found so people can continue to do their job, but it doesn't solve the problem. So we would open a problem, and in that problem definition, we would have the change request number, the number of the problem, what the description is, the assignment group that's working on it, and so on. Incidents that are pending change, we were talking that some incidents, trouble tickets, create the need to create a change. That's where we would list them, and the request for change number is listed here. This incident spawned this request for change. How about this one? Incidents that have been caused by change. Sometimes we have done our best intentions and we've tested. Sometimes we make a change and it creates incidents. We would link those here. That way we can report on this sort of information and keep track of what type of changes, when they were made, what kind of problems were as a result of making a change. And then conflicts would be scheduling for resources or time. It might be outside of a maintenance window. Someone may be trying to change the same server that I'm changing at the same time. Those conflicts would be identified here. Now that we've gone through looking at the change and filling out these tabs, the next tab would be planning. This is a good idea on any change request or any request for change, but when you get to a significant or major, this information becomes more critical and it will be required for a significant or major change. And it's really just simple documentation of the change, what configuration items are involved, what's the class of that configuration item. We're talking about all of the things that are contained in the configuration management database. These are the types of information that goes in the configuration items in the CMDB. Change details, again, it gives you an opportunity to explain what you're doing, why you're doing it. Change plan. When we get to bigger changes, it's good practice, and I think it's required in some cases, where you have to say, this is why I'm making the change, this is the plan I'm following to make the change. Whatever words go in there are fine, but remember, if you have documentation that you did before submitting the change, you can always attach it by clicking on the paperclip and adding the file to it. Same as the other way. Backout plan. A lot of times when we're making production changes, we need to know that, hey, if we implement the change and then we test and verify and find something that we don't like or we think that it didn't go the way it was supposed to, we want to be able to revert production systems back to their unaltered state So there needs to be a backout plan. Again, see attached or type it in here, free-form text, lets you put a lot of information in there. And then test plan, good insurance policy. These are the test steps that I followed to make sure that the change would be implemented successfully and do as we thought it would. Always a good idea to have a test plan, especially on larger changes. And again, it's required significant or major changes. You're going to want to put your test plan in here, attach it as a document, however that works. Now, we've gotten into some of the finer points of request for change and the way that requests for changes follow their life cycle. One of the last things we're going to cover, or a couple of the last things we're going to cover, is how does the system keep us informed? How am I going to be able to check on what's going on with my request for change? What state is it in? Who's it waiting for? That sort of information. One of the places I like to start is notes, and I had promised we'd talk about this. Customer visible additional comments. If there are people on the watch list that you want to send information to, you can update your customer notes here. Be aware that when you're typing in notes here, these are visible to anyone that has access to the change. They're also visible to folks that are on the watch list. So make your comments be kind. How's that saying go? Let my words be kind and thoughtful today, for tomorrow I may need to eat them. But the green field indicates just the opposite of what it should be. It should be red or orange and say, danger, whatever you type in here, people can see. And then work notes, remember, we were talking about work notes list, who wants to see updates. If you want to send it to your coworkers and you want to get a little bit more in detail, that would be a good place to add it. That will send emails when you save that. You can update or save at that point, and it will send an email telling people what has happened. Now, down below here, the activity log. What's been going on with this request for change since I started? The email that it sends out for approval will have a brief synopsis of the change. It will also give the person that's being requested to approve it the ability to click on that change number and go into ServiceNow and look at the specifics that you filled in, like the test plan, the backout plan, any of the documentation you put in there, the reason I'm making the change, the description of the change. All of that information is contained in the change, but when the system sends out a approval request, it looks like this. It will be who the change is assigned to, what group is he in, what's being changed, when is it going to be ended by, when's it going to start, so on and so forth. You can read the work in progress. All that information about the request for change is contained in emails, and that's what they look like when the system sends them out. You can see here that Rock got an email from me, and the short description is in the line of the email, the subject line of the email. It talks about the change number. The short description says this is what's been going on with it, and it was sent to myself and to Rock. What does it look like? It's this little envelope says, I want to look at the email, so I just click on the plus sign, and that's the exact email that got sent out from the QA system. It went to me, it went to Rock. The subject line says your change number, and the short description says it was approved. The change number is here. So you can see that's an actual system-generated email. Same with this one. More information here. A lot of times folks can just go ahead and approve changes at a glance. All the information they need to look at is contained in the email, so they can approve it right from there. If they have questions or want more details about the change, then they can go back in and click on the change number itself, and it will bring them into ServiceNow. So the things that we've covered today are how to change the environment so it looks the way you like it to look. And one of the last things I'd like to cover, one of the more important things I think would be to show you how to get help within ServiceNow. ServiceNow has a very nice, very well-designed, laid out help system. If you're familiar with Wikipedia, that's what ServiceNow has used for their format for help text and for help information. It's called the ServiceNow Wiki. And by going to this gear, clicking on help, it will bring up the ServiceNow Wiki. So all sorts of information in here. Let's just click on one now. We'll click on change management. And probably a view you're mostly familiar with. This is the Wikipedia type view. It talks about what's in this topic. Gives an overview of change management. Talks about raising and recording changes and so on. There is a search function. We talked about dashboards. If you want to learn a little bit more about dashboards, just click on dashboards in the search, and it will give you several topics to look at. How to use performance analytics in the dashboard, some of the dashboards that are out there, how to use them. I want to create a custom dashboard, or I want to have different dashboards, or I want to make the dashboard work the way I want it to. I want to show the information that I want to see. All of that information would be in here. One of the things that's nice that I particularly like about the ServiceNow Wiki is that when I click on help, it opens a different tab. And the reason I like that is because now I can go back and forth in between the two, and it says, well, do this. So I can just go right back to my topic, and it's there. Let's click on this guy and just show what sort of information is in here. It functions just like a web page. All different topics available to you. Let's search on environment. Different environments. So as you can see, it's a fully functioning and very well laid out information source. It will save you lots of aggravation. It's not nearly as punishing or painful as finding help, let's say, for instance, in Windows, but all of the topics are laid out in the same format, and they're all very helpful. So if I want to create a dashboard, these are the steps that I would take. I can actually click right to the environment and follow along. When I get to a certain section, I can go back and move down to the next topic or the next instruction. Go back and do that here, so on and so forth. That's why I really like the ServiceNow, and that's why I think it's great that it opens in a separate tab. So we've talked about changing the system view or the environment to be different colors or different style. If you have any need for vision impaired or 508 compliant software, you would simply click on the gear, come down and click on Enable Accessibility. That enables the interface between ServiceNow and things like JAWS or DragonSpeak. All of that software should be, or the last I knew, all of that software was 100% compatible with ServiceNow. They are 100% 508 compliant. I want to change the theme again, just to give you an idea. You can bop back and forth on there. So we've covered the environment itself, how to maneuver, how to manipulate, how to get around in the environment, how to find things that you're looking for. How to make the environment look the way you want it to or act the way you want it to. The dashboard is different. How you would get to the home screen. Just hover over your dashboard that you want to select. And all of these dashboards are customizable. Last, we're going to go down and we're going to say, okay, we're in this request for change. I'm going to look at the tasks, and there's one task open, so the change will not close until that task is closed. I'm going to right-click on that task number, and I'm just going to say close the task. I'm going to go ahead and leave this page. So the change itself actually went through the process, and now how do I see where it is? I can search for text within the change request. All of my changes are listed here. This is the one that we were working on today. You can see the state has now gone to closed complete, and that change is now saved in ServiceNow, but as far as we're concerned, we're done with it. One of the other things we like to look at, if I'm looking for a specific change, there's lots of features I can use. I can sort by change number, just a trick. The numbers are assigned sequentially. So generally speaking, by changing that sort from Z to A will bring up the last changes that I had, or the last changes that were submitted. I can sort by short description, sort by requested by, has it been approved, the type, the state, so on and so forth. There's lots of different fields I can use to locate different requests for change. Okay, with that, I think we've covered all that we need to cover on the request for change. Again, my name is Don, last name is Gaitor, G-A-I-T-O-R. My email address is don.gaitor, G-A-I-T-O-R, @its.ny.gov. Phone number at my desk is 518-549-0419, and I work 8:30 to 4:30 Monday through Friday. I hope this is helpful to you. Please feel free to contact me with questions or concerns or anything you feel I can be of help with. Otherwise, enjoy and have a great day. Tim, I think you're all, do you have any questions that you'd like to cover?
No, not at this time. Thank you, Don.
You're more than welcome. It's been my pleasure. And keep that information handy. I am in the global address list, so if you need to get a hold of me, by all means, reach out and I'll get back to you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks and have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.